Today we're going to talk about the ways to manage and reduce our chronic pain and slow down the signs of aging using very simple techniques. My guest today is Kidawski, who's going to provide us with a whole new way of looking at the way our body functions. I'm Risa Morimoto, your host. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach, and you're watching Modern Aging, where we chat about innovative and holistic ways to elevate our health and well-being as we age. I'd love for you to subscribe if you're new to the channel. All you got to do is click on that little red button below with that little bell next to it to be sure to be notified whenever a new episode is uploaded. I'd love for you to also check out our website at thisismodernaging.com, where we have all sorts of new articles, podcasts, videos, and courses. My guest today is Kidawski. He's a fascia maneuver coach. You want to know what that is? You'll definitely have to stick around and find out. He's also an author and founder of Influential Health Solutions. He was an elite athlete coach, trainer for many years. He trained Navy SEALs and professional athletes and people like you and me. He has a really integrative approach to helping to heal and reverse chronic conditions like pain, with a special focus on the fascia system. If you don't know what fascia is or how it functions in your body, you're definitely going to want to stick around to the end, so check it out. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here.
Your topic is a very popular one, a very needed one. I love your approach to pain management, to dieting and eating. It's very much in terms of, it's very integrative, which I love. And it seems like you don't really focus on one part of the body, but you kind of look at the entire being, right? And
Correct.
All the systems, which I love.
Number one system in the human body is not the brain. It's not the skin. It's not any of the organs. I mean, technically fascia is an organ, but the number one system in the body that nobody is really talking about, that we literally probably know only 4% of what it does, is the human fascial system. It literally is our architecture. Okay, people think that bones hold us up. It isn't. It is our fascia. People think that, oh, the immune system is a separate entity. The immune system is actually born from the fascial system, okay?
You want to describe what the fascial system is, or what fascia is?
Yeah, absolutely. Fascia is this gigantic web-like connective tissue that connects everything to everything, okay? So if we were looking at this in, let's say, real-world terms, we could say that fascia is kind of like electric cables, all right? Because the electric grid, it traverses, I mean, you can drive on the highway and you just see cables going on and on and on and on. And it sends a signal from one area to another with lightning speed, okay? And that's what fascia is. Fascia is the overall regulator of the entire human body. It connects everything to everything, okay? And it's kind of like the dictator, all right? And then the brain is kind of like the slave. And then you have the nerves and the organs and everything like that, that may even be lower, okay, that listen to the brain and the fascia, all right? And the dominant signal is always going to win. If the fascia is like, no, we need to secure this area around the liver, no matter how much no matter how much duress or how many problems the liver is having, and the brain is trying to kind of help it, the fascia will not let it go. It'll say, no, we have too big of a problem. We need to contain this. So I was taught when I was going through my master's at the University of Hawaii, that the brain and the nerves and the muscles, they were in control of everything. Didn't really talk too much about the organs. But when we look way back in something like Chinese medicine, 4, 5, 6, 10,000 years ago, we're going to see a lot about meridians where even fascia and nerve and muscle is going to be controlled by an organ that's having a serious problem. Okay, so here in the Western world, we are focused a lot on using surgery in order to get rid of pain, or we're focused on shots and chemicals in order to get rid of pain. Where for the last 15 years, what I've found and what I've been focusing on is building this roadmap, just either through human touch or through the use of something like a lacrosse ball, a baseball, or a softball, or several other mobility tools. People know about foam rollers and whatnot. And the one link that we're missing is we still are not working on the proper metric. We're not working with what is mechanistically true in the human body still when we think that we're using one of these tools to open up muscle. Muscle, which we'll unpack in this episode, is really just a dumb piece of meat. It's just sitting there, kind of has no idea what it's supposed to do until something tells it. And we used to think that the brain would send a message to the nerve, which would then send a message to the muscle in order to contract. And what we're finding out is that fascia is the primary control mechanism, telling the brain to tell the nerve to tell the muscle what to do. Okay.
Wow.
And if the muscle is not doing its job, okay, correctly, if we are not moving correctly, if we're not moving with intent, or if we have really bad habits, we sit in a chair 8, 9, 10 hours a day, if we're a bricklayer and we're on our knees constantly, okay, what ends up happening is, in order for the system to be efficient, okay, the fascia will say, we are not going to let the knee joint go past this range of motion. We're not going to let the hip joint go past this range of motion. So when you sit in a chair from the age of 25 to the age of 60, and then you can't squat to get your butt below your knee anymore, you're uber stiff, you start having problems with your hip flexors and your lower back. This is one of the reasons why. Your body says if you're not going to use the full range of motion, okay, then you're going to lose it. And fascia tightens up in order to be efficient, in order to make the body efficient. We are still geared for this evolutionary survival mechanism, okay, where we need to conserve as much energy as possible. Fascia, the brain, the muscles, the nerves, they don't understand you can just go down the street to your local supermarket in a car and get food. So when we make something a habit in the body, or one of my favorite quotes is, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. So every day that we move, movement is practice. And when the body starts to recognize we're sitting with the hips, the knees, and the ankles at 90 degrees for 8 to 10 hours a day, it says this must be our environment. And
Right.
I'm going to make sure that we're efficient in it. And this is how we get tight. In my book, I talk about what happens between the age of 4 and 44. When you're 4, you can put your foot up. I mean, my daughter, she's 3. She can still lay on her back and she'll bring her foot all the way up behind her head. You know, and I mean, by the time you're even 18 or 20, good luck trying to do that, unless if you're in gymnastics or dancing or something like that. So all of this is dictated and allowed through the fascial system, this connective tissue that our body has.
Clearly, this, sitting has become the new smoking. Everybody talks about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's a problem, right? And I think that the worse the problem gets, it's harder to try to get out of it, because it's like this perpetuating bad habit that becomes worse and worse with the years that go by, and you really try to prevent it from getting worse. So what simple things can we do to really get out of these bad habits and move more that's not going to cause us more pain or more discomfort? Because I think we stop moving because we don't want to be in discomfort.
Right.
But we don't realize that we're actually causing ourselves more pain.
Right. I'm going to preface my answer with this little bit of knowledge. We as human beings have 3 stages to aging, okay? And the aging process, as science is finding out, is actually dictated by the ECM, the extracellular matrix. That is a part of the neurofascial system, okay, that sits between our skin and our muscle tissue. So it's like a second layer of skin almost, but it's fascia, okay? When we turn 34 years old, the ECM starts to send out aging properties into the body, telling it we need to prepare to get old. Okay, so right at the age of 34, the body's already preparing for age. It's already saying you're going to get stiff, you're going to get slow, and you're going to get tired. The second time that happens is when we're 60, and the third time it happens is when we're 78. Okay,
Why
so
those ages? Do they know?
no idea. Completely arbitrary. Completely arbitrary. Nobody knows. Okay? But what you start to see is you just see this flood of hormones, this flood of cytokines, this flood of immune system properties like M1 and M2 macrophages. It just start to get out of balance. Okay? And this imbalance, it catapults aging. So the older you get, the faster you get older if you're not paying attention to the health of your fascia. And where does the health of our fascia come from? It comes from the food we eat. It comes from the stress we're under on a daily basis, okay? It comes from how well we move and how consistently we move, all right? And I could also say a huge one, which we're all guilty of, even me in some instances, is sleep. How well and how deep we sleep, not just how long we sleep. You can be in bed for 8 hours and really only get 4 to 5 hours of quality sleep. The rest of the time is spent thinking, tossing, turning, things like that. And as we get more and more into sleep debt, I mean, that's the time when we regenerate. That's the time when our body rebuilds. Okay, so like I said, as all of these things are declining, and one of the most alarming charts you can ever see, two of the most alarming charts you can actually see. I hope I'm not getting too far off topic, okay? But melatonin.
No, but this is all really, it's all interrelated, right? So
It's all interrelated. If you look at a melatonin chart, which is our sleep hormone, all right, the amount of melatonin that we produce actually starts to decline when we're around 25, 26 years old, okay? So when you are born, you have a lot of advantages. Number one, melatonin production, very, very high. And then we get into the second piece where we look at Akkermansia and bifidobacteria, which are the two primary good bacteria that we have in our gut. They are also very high. Okay, so when you look at a baby, my daughter, for example, 3 years old, she sleeps for 12 to 13 hours. She has uber energy, okay, insta energy from the minute she wakes up to even when she's going to bed, she's out of control. She's laughing, she's rolling, she's throwing herself on the bed, jumping off, playing. You shut the lights off, and within a matter of 5 to 15 minutes, boom, she's down, right? And like a marching band can go through, okay, and she's not going to be waking up, all right?
and you're very lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, tell me about it. So nobody's talking about these things. Nobody's looking at these markers and saying, my gosh, like, what would we do? How would we perform, at the age of 45 or 55 or 65 if we regulated melatonin, made sure that melatonin production was high, and then if we supplemented our body with something like human milk oligosaccharides, HMO, and apple peel, which actually feeds Akkermansia, okay, in the body.
Actual apple peel?
Yeah, apple peels. I've been doing this stuff for a little over a year and a half now. I just turned 43 this year. So I'm already prepping my body to make sure that the older I get, the slower I age, rather than the older I get, the faster I age. Okay, 2 to 3 times a week, I'll supplement with between 40 and 60 milligrams of melatonin. And people will scream out and be like, oh my God, I mean, I only take 2.5 milligrams, or that's way too much. No, it's not. If you look at the chart, I'm at 43 right now, making less than half of the melatonin that I was when I was 26. And that's not even 20 years later. And I'm already making less than half of the amount of melatonin. When we look at melatonin is in everything. It's in plants, it's in animals, it's in single-celled bacteria. Everything. I wouldn't be surprised if one of these days we find it in dirt doing something, okay? And we make these supplements that, like I said, they have 0.5 milligrams of melatonin or 2.5 milligrams of melatonin. And I'm not trying to throw doctors under the bus but you'll have doctors or practitioners be like, don't take any more than 5. I mean, I've had people in my practice come in and tell me this. They've told me, my doctor said, don't roll for more than 30 seconds at a time on a foam roller. When we look at the science, it takes 2 minutes to increase what we call hyaluronic acid production in between the muscle fiber layers, which helps our tissue glide. So when we have pain, we get an adhesion. That means that fascia has stuck itself down and said, this area is not moving. It's glued, okay? Now, if we roll on that with a ball, with a foam roller, any type of mobility device for 30 seconds, we're not sending enough of a signal to the body to loosen up and start to melt that adhesion. We need it minimum 2 minutes. Minimum 2 minutes.
So I know this is a lot in terms of your pain management technique, and I'm glad that you're talking about this. So tell me a little bit about pain itself, right? What's happening when we have pain? As we get older, there's very typical pain, whether it's back pain, neck pain, hip pain.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you suggest people do minimally to help eradicate that pain?
Great question.
As opposed to just taking a pill. I mean.
Yeah, great question. Anything over a pain of 3 on a scale of 10 in the human body is fascia, okay?
Is fascial pain, you mean?
Fascia is fascial pain, okay? And
why is that? Why do you say that?
Because fascia, the pain sensors in fascia are heavily outnumbered to the pain sensors in muscle, okay? And to add on top of that, the pressure sensors that we have in fascia are even higher than the pain sensors. So we have more pressure sensors in fascia than we do pain sensors. And when we look at the muscle tissue, there's almost no pressure or pain sensors in the muscle tissue. And people, educated professionals in the medical community, will say that the pain is happening because of a nerve. Now, I've had probably 10 to 12 people come into me and say, I've had ablations, okay, which is where they burn the nerve, rhizotomies, where they cut the nerve, okay, and people with epidurals, 4 to 5 epidurals over the course of 2 to 3 years. Their pain comes right back. So if we're working with what's mechanistically true in the body, and I say the nerve is the root cause of your pain, and I cut that nerve and the pain comes right back, what gives? How come my thesis isn't proving to be true? What, do we got to go and burn another nerve or cut a different one, or I was wrong with that? Fascia, if you look at it under a microscope, okay, trillions upon trillions upon trillions of microtubules that wrap every organ, attach organ to bone, attach organ to muscle, attach muscle to nerve, attach nerve to muscle, and blood vessels to muscle, okay? Fascia wraps, twists, rotates. It encompasses every single piece in our body, okay? And it has an infinite number of pathways to get a pain report back to your brain and say, this is still not good. So you can fool it for a while. You can cut, you can burn, you can inject, all right? But the fascial system, it just has no end. It's a closed loop, okay? Which means that it typically it's not necessarily dictated by anything that you do outside of the human body to any other portion of it. Okay, so only the fascia is what is going to save us in regards to reducing our pain.
So what do you recommend people do if they have...
It's maintenance.
Or do you treat acute pain differently than chronic pain?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And really it all comes down to a matter of time and pressure. Typically people that have had pain for a much longer period of time, they're going to need to see me for a couple more sessions. And at the beginning, the pressure might be a little bit deeper. Okay, still gentle, but the pressure is going to be a little bit deeper. And in some cases, when the fascia has been locked up for such a long period of time, two things happen in a negative feedback loop that make it infinitely worse, okay? You can't get any fresh blood in or oxygen or water to supply the fascia and the muscle tissue, and you can't get any waste out from the byproduct of metabolic function, okay? So what ends up happening is the tissue gets really dry and it becomes numb. It's still producing pain. It's still telling the body we have a huge problem here, but I'll press on a big adhesion or trigger point, something fibrosis that's really gnarly, and I'll ask my client, like, does this hurt? And they're like, no, I can't feel anything. Okay, and that's how out of touch we become with our body. So to start, maintenance is key. I don't care how busy you are, if you're the president of the United States or the CEO of a massive company, Microsoft, Apple, whatever, everybody has between, I would say, 15 to 30 minutes a day to care for their fascia, their nerves, and their muscles to make sure that everything stays open and free. And there are a couple of things that we can do. Number one, buy a basic foam roller, okay? The one that I use is a little bit more on the harsh side. It's an M80 roller. It's very stiff. We have PVC in the middle, okay? And some pretty dense foam on the outside. But start off with something that you feel you can handle. If you got to buy a couple of them from Amazon and test them out, okay? When you're doing your maintenance work, we want to keep the pain threshold between a 4 to a 6, somewhere around there on a scale of 10. If you don't handle pain too well, stay at about a 4. If you can handle pain pretty good, stay around a 6, okay?
How are you using that foam roller?
There's probably 10 million videos on YouTube, but there are different ways to orient yourself on the ground to roll out specific areas of your body, the top of your quad, the side of it, your lower back. You can do your lats. You can go up against the wall and do your shoulder or your arm or your forearm, things like that. There's a multitude of different ways to do it, but what are we doing? We are overriding those pressure sensors in the fascial network to get the pain sensors to calm down, okay? We are pushing the water and the collagen through those tubes like a pump, okay? And just kind of pushing the water back and forth, getting it moving again, right? Stagnant water does what? Gets dirty and it smells. When water's going over a waterfall, right, and it's moving, it looks absolutely pristine. It looks beautiful, okay? So fascia is about 80% water, and then when we look at muscle's around 80% water, all right, at the same time. We're just a walking sack of water. When it gets stagnant in certain areas, we get pain, we get problems, okay? The life force is not moving anymore, all right?
You use other tools as well in addition to the foam roller. What else do you use?
When you want to get concentrated, like let's say I have a rotator cuff problem, okay? A foam roller is really not going to hack it. It's just too big, the circumference, it's too soft. We want to use something like a lacrosse ball or a baseball. I've had people come in and be like, oh, I should use something like a tennis ball. And I said, no, you're not listening. I said a lacrosse ball or a baseball. We need something hard. All right. When we're using something that's really, really soft, think about my thumbs, my fingers, or my elbow. Okay. Those areas are not very soft. And this is what I use most of the time in order to open up structures of the body. So if we're going to use a tennis ball, if we're going to use a very soft foam roller, and we're just on there chilling, you know, like we're having a Sunday morning cup of coffee, we're not really going to be doing very much to get rid of our pain and open the structure up. There needs to be a level of discomfort. And what I tell people is just get comfortably uncomfortable. Something where you're like, oh man, like that's really, that's burning, or that is definitely a little bit painful, but not something where you get on there and you're sweating and your eyes are bugging out and you're gonna vomit. We cannot push pain to those type of levels because the fascial system is just gonna contract. It's gonna perceive it as a threat and say, I don't like that, okay? It's like a scared little puppy. You got to kind of like show it's okay, everything's fine. I know this is going to be a little bit uncomfortable, but it's good for you. And then after you keep on doing that for a couple minutes, the fascial system says, okay, yes, I trust this. It's a little bit uncomfortable, but I actually can feel that it's doing something good for us. Okay. So this is all in my books. I have 5 books out on Amazon that dictate everything, what modality, what tool you're using for how long and where. Certain roadmaps, especially in my back pain Bible, I have several different ways in there how the back really gets into trouble and how you can open up and clear these things to make yourself pain free again and enjoy moving younger as you start to age more and more. You see what I'm saying? That's really what it's about.
People don't necessarily react until it's, they're in crisis,
Yes.
unfortunately.
Yes.
We have to shift into this preventative mode.
In some cases, reset, and I would almost say in most cases, it takes close to 10 to 15 years for a specific pain to develop. Okay? And somebody will say, I know the exact day my back pain began. It was October 13th of 1989. And I'm like, wow, really? And they're like, yep, that's the first day that I noticed my back pain. And I look at them and I say, your body has been building that pain up and trying to mitigate it for close to 10 to 15 years. So actually you're looking somewhere around 1974, not 1989. And they're like, what, really? This is what science shows us. This is what I find in my body, and this is what I find in my practice and whatnot. Okay, people will say that their pain started on this day, but then as I talk to them more and more, they're like, oh yeah, no, I had an accident. I was in a really bad car accident when I was 25. When did your pain start? When I was 32. It took 7 years for the pain of that accident that we didn't clear to develop. And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about it this way. Yeah, I got hit on my right side, and it's my right hip, lower back, and knee that hurt today. So
do you find that doing these exercises, or do you do these exercises on a daily basis, or is it just like 3 times a week is fine? And how do we try to wean ourselves off of pain medication when the pain is just so, unbearable for so many people?
Yeah, it's all about titration. You would start off with your normal dose, and then as you start to foam roll more and more or get kind of like a body work routine going, you're going to notice on some days everything is dictated by your body. You'll wake up and you're going to be like, wow, I don't really have a 9 pain anymore. I got a 6. Okay, well, maybe let's try a couple milligrams less of something. I'm not a doctor. I can't really prescribe or tell people what to do in that respect, but that's what I would do. That's what I did do when I was younger. I mean, I was on over 1,000 milligrams of Advil plus per day, probably a couple times per day. Okay, wow. And then as I slowly started to figure this out and take my own pain away, I got to the point where, that type of medication was no longer needed. And now today, if I do have any type of, something like a headache come up, I'm not immune to any of this stuff by any respect. I'll take things like curcumin. Okay, and one of the other things that we're finding out is out of all of the other quote unquote longevity medicine that we have out there, things like NAC, things like metformin, calcium alpha ketoglutarate, stuff like that, aspirin is actually beating them all. So one of the things that I started to add to my stack on my fasting days is just taking around 300 milligrams of aspirin, regular aspirin. They just came out with a great study. The study was done on mice, and other animals, but these are the same studies that they use for things like metformin and that I just recently mentioned. But so now I'm getting into aspirin again, but in a maintenance, a very low dose, and I'm not taking it every single day, and I'm taking it for longevity. I'm not taking it because I'm in uber amounts of pain.
So how do you relate weight and weight gain to pain? Because I imagine the heavier you are, if you have pain issues, that the weight is also contributing to that pain.
Yep, body is water, okay, and the fascia and the muscle is mostly comprised of water. All right, what makes tissue but food and water, right? So if we're drinking a poor source of water, like bottled water, okay, or our municipal water without any type of filter, we are going to be getting a whole bunch of plastic chemicals, number one, from our plastic bottled water that's been sitting on a truck and on a shelf for who knows how long, okay? And then in our municipal water supply, we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of chemicals, things like chlorine, things like fluoride, all the pharmaceuticals that everybody's on for their high blood pressure. All these things are having actions and reactions in the human body, changing our own hormones, creating problems. And then when we look at our food, okay, how often are you drinking beer, having wine, vodka, spirits, things like that? Is it a daily basis? Well, your liver's in trouble, okay? And when the liver gets in trouble, we are going to have this gigantic intersection of sewage that just gets backed up, okay? And as we eat more and more sugar or processed foods, excuse me, what's going to end up happening is we're going to shift our gut bacteria. And when we look at the human body, there are 3 genomes in the human body, not just one, like we're taught. Okay, we have the bacterial genome. This is all in Joel Green's book, The Immunity Code. We have the bacterial genome, trillions and trillions and trillions of bacteria, more so than our own body. All right? We also have the mitochondrial genome, which helps give us energy. And then we have the human genome, our DNA. Well, we're told in the media and in school that the only thing that matters is the human DNA, when in fact, that's the last thing that matters. The human DNA is dictated by everything else, primarily the gut bacteria. So what we eat tells the mitochondria how much energy we have, which then tells the immune system and our DNA how high of a performer we can be. Okay, so if I'm eating nothing but processed food and fast food and drinking soda all day, our human DNA is not going to be indicative of a super performer or an elite athlete, right? So what ends up happening is the body gets contaminated, everything starts going awry, the bad bacteria gets very, very healthy. We get things like candida, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and whatnot. And our flourishing, greenhouse of what is supposed to be like beautiful petunias and sunflowers is literally now weeds. And what does bacteria want to do? It's life, and life wants to live. So we once again have this negative feedback loop saying, I want more of that. What do you want? You want the greasy fried foods. What do you want? You want the pizzas. What do you want? You want the very high carb sweet things like ice cream. Okay? And people say when they come to me for nutrition counseling, oh, there's no way I can eat that. I just don't like asparagus. Or there's no way I can give up putting sugar in my coffee in the morning. I love it. And I say, you don't love it. It's your bacteria that loves it. Your bacteria is sending signals to your hormones saying, I need that in order to live. Okay? And people will also say, well, I can't live without my coffee. I love coffee. I drink it almost every day. Not every day. Okay? But there's actually a bacteria that science has identified that can live solely off caffeine. So when people
So how do we change these habits then?
Very slowly, very slowly. It's, everything, if you listen, I'm becoming a certified immune-centric coach with Joel Green, and that's where a lot of this information is coming from, okay? But if you listen to your body, okay, and if you listen to what I'm saying, none of this is a panacea. You can't just take one thing. And this is what we as human beings are bad at. I can't even just blame America or blame Eastern Europe or Russia or China or something like that. we are very, very bad at taking care of ourselves. We're not taught to. And this has taken me, I started when I was 19, 24 years to develop this knowledge and this roadmap of how to help people sufficiently. And everything, every single day is tiny steps. It's 1% to 2% every single day, okay? People want to talk a lot about intermittent fasting and how good it is for you. But the science shows, and something that I went through, is if you fast too much, you actually start to get a lot of negative things to happen. And it's very difficult to then make that switch. Okay, so if we look at it, first take for instance Joel's 2-day core pattern. Every 2 days, you're doing what's called an amplified fast, where you are doing intermittent fasting. You're not going to eat till around noon or later if you're not getting that signal. And if we take those 2 days, those every 2 days, and we average it out over 15 years, you are actually going to be fasting for 8.8 out of those 15 years.
Right.
Okay, so that's how we have our baby steps. If you are in a lot of pain and you only foam roll or do body maintenance, let's say once every 3 days, then you're never going to get ahead and you're never really going to get control of that problem. But if you do it every 2 days, or if you do it every day, let's say, just humor me here, every day for a year, okay? I can guarantee you, you're going to get in control of that problem and it is going to get better. Don't get discouraged. Don't use something for a day or two, like a foam roller or whatnot, be like, this doesn't work. You have been, if you're 60, 70, 80 years old, you've been moving and not maintaining your body for that amount of time. It's going to take a little bit for your body to start to respond and shift in the other direction. So be patient, be tender, okay? Love yourself through the process. That's the best thing that I can say.